There we go. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and start with a couple of spoiler alerts, which is this is not a snake oil presentation. I will not be selling you snake oil on how to get rid of all the bugs in the world. I know, right? Can someone get this man a table to flip over? There's also no magic silver bullet or any of that stuff that will be coming up later. But I will be taking you folks on a journey. And it was the journey of how I arrived at this place. And so the thing I'm going to ask you to do is to sort of take everything that you know and you think about bugs and be willing to sort of put that on the side for a moment and just kind of walk through this with me. The other thing I want to say is thank you all for making it in this morning. I know I had a lot of tough competition in terms of workshops and things like that. So I appreciate you all coming along on this journey with me and listening to something that I feel incredibly passionate about, which is engineering quality and psychological safety on engineering teams and all those things. So really, that's what we're going to talk about. So let me tell you a little bit about who's taking you on this journey. My name is Tunde. I am VP of Engineering at Daylight. We're basically a digital banking platform focused on creating financial services and tools and offerings for the LGBTQ community. I've been doing this for a little while now, the whole software engineering thing. For those of you who have also been doing this for a little while, I was around just before the first set of browser wars, where you had to sort of choose teams between ActiveX or Java and all of that stuff, Sun Microsystems, blah, blah, blah. I've been doing this for a little bit, and I may have created a bug or two in my time. So let's go ahead and kind of jump into this. I want everyone to get their shoulders ready because it's going to be a raise of hands exercises, but we're going to do a quick exercise around triaging a couple of issues. So for each of these, I want to go through this and ask you all sort of collectively as a group whether you think this particular item is a bug or not. So I'm going to start with the first bubble there. Your app crashes. All right. Users can type numbers into their first name and last name. All right. A push notification that was supposed to be received immediately shows up on the device 2 minutes late. Bug or not a bug? All right. A third-party API publishes a breaking change. Bug, not a bug. Awesome. What I love about this exercise is that none of you voted the same on each of these things, but we've all run into these types of things as bugs or being described as bugs in our lives, right? And I think the challenge here, especially when we're talking about bugs, is there's no singly held perspective on what a bug actually is. If we can't all agree on, while we can't all agree that these are bugs, can we all agree that this is unexpected behavior in our app? This was not stuff that we thought was going to happen when the thing happened. Okay, cool. So unexpected behavior, more on that in a minute. In the meantime, let's come back to bugs. And I want to talk a little bit about the status quo. And the reality is that, in my experience, the way that most software teams address bugs, issues, defects, whatever the heck we want to call it, is completely broken. So a raise of hands here in the room, when you're working on a project and that project has a bug, does it have the same level of prioritization or greater prioritization than any new feature work? Greater? Those who say it has greater, raise your hand, right? Tends to be the case, right? So what that usually does is create this situation where the engineering team sits down to do work, and the work that they're going to do, or whoever's deciding the prioritization of that work is in contention, new features versus bugs is in contention. And so if we keep talking about, so for example, if the third-party API thing is broken, right? There was this break and change that was made. We have to sort of decide whether we're going to spend our time as an engineering team either resolving that API issue that's broken or building something new like push notifications or things like that. And the reality is that taking this approach makes you really, really inefficient as a team, like super really inefficient as a team, but not in the way that you think, right? So bugs typically come our way in the form of, it doesn't work. And you're like, what doesn't work? Well, it doesn't work. I don't know what to do. It doesn't work. I tried to do the thing and it doesn't do the thing. And you get a lot of this ambiguity, right? And ambiguity is like the arch enemy of solution. You can just never create a solution or solve a problem if you don't know exactly what it is, right? The other way it makes you inefficient is that the time to debate whether something is or isn't a bug oftentimes is greater than the time to decide what class of bug it is. Is this a P1, a P2, something we don't really care about, a feature, whatever, which is totally greater than the time to just fix the damn thing in the first place, right? So like a lot of wasted time just sort of debating and then classifying versus the time that the engineer is going to take to do it. And then nobody likes their baby being called ugly, right? So if the product is doing something that we didn't expect it to be doing, then someone goes, it's a bug, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, what do you mean it's a bug? Like I wrote that code and it worked fine. So I tested this code and it worked fine, right? So like that sort of decreases motivation. But the other reason, another reason it makes you inefficient is that it's a false sense of product quality. I'll come back to this later, but oftentimes, sort of the measure of the quality of work output is measured by the number of bugs. So if something has 365 bugs, stakeholders, folks who don't understand engineering or product quality will go, 365 bugs, right? Even though they don't even know sort of the types of those bugs or whether they are significant things or not. And then all of these things really distract the team from delivering customer value. Like if at the end of the day, we're supposed to create product and we're supposed to put it out there, then if we're spending time debating over things, if we're spending time trying to get ambiguity, if we're just not feeling psychologically or emotionally safe based on our products or things of this nature, then it really just sort of distracts from our ability to be able to deliver customer value. So I want to sort of take a second and kind of double click into this idea of unexpected behavior. So what if we stop thinking about bugs as bugs and start thinking of them as unexpected behavior, right? So bugs tend to be thought of as things that are coding errors, right? Oh, the engineer didn't write this. They let people put numbers in their first name, et cetera, those types of things. I think we can all agree that they aren't all coding errors, but for the sake of this sort of simple conversation, I'm going to say that they are. And to me, this idea of unexpected behavior is things just happen in the world. Third-party APIs break. The backbones of notification that we're doing push notifications. Firebase has some sort of like delay, et cetera, et cetera. Things just happen. So like I want, for the sake of this conversation, for us to start thinking about unexpected behavior equals things that just happen in the world plus bugs. And I can see some of you in the back of the room are probably like, but wait a minute, you've not done anything magical, Tunde. You just said, I am super skeptical, as engineers are, it just sounds like you just want to call it a different thing for the sake of a different thing, and now we have no more bugs in the world, and then it's all over. Totally feel you on that one. That's not at all what I'm saying. But I do want to I just want you to know that like there is a way to create a system releases without bugs. It can be done. I've done it multiple times on multiple teams. There's some super cool benefits for doing it. And honestly, I will never go back. Like I will never treat things differently than this. And that was a conversation, for those of you who were in the room earlier, that was a conversation I was having with my CTO, Paul, about sort of this. So I want to take a second and talk a little bit about how I got here. So I was once younger than I am now. And I got put on this project, and it was for this super big strategic customer We were doing some crazy bleeding edge stuff. Why they decided to, I was a brand new engineering leader. Why they decided to give this to me, I don't know, but they did. And I decided like, hey, I'm finally in charge and I am going to change the way we do everything. Every other engineering leader that came before me, they didn't know what the heck they were doing. And like, I now am in charge of driving the bus, so like, I'm gonna change things. We're gonna do agile as purely as possible. We're gonna do all these idealistic things and that. Anybody else in the room ever have this experience? Awesome. And so the other thing that I had was on the other side of this was I had a project manager who was also sort of first time on this big budget, big important project as well. But the engineering team that was working with me was very experienced. Like these were a bunch of folks who had been in battle for a while doing a number of things, et cetera. But I was really sort of like, I'm gonna do this different and I'm gonna do this right and I'm gonna change things up. And we did, we changed a lot of things up. We changed sort of our expectations and requirements around stand-up and like how we were gonna interact with each other as engineers and sort of like the things we were gonna hold the team accountable to. We made a number of different changes. Many of them worked great, some of them didn't, so we abandoned them and moved on to other things. But one of the things that we did that made the biggest difference is what I wanna talk about now, which is we had near daily demos of our code and things like that. And this particular sort of change had a number of side effects, which are basically the things I'm gonna talk to you about. So I had a product manager who was incredibly engaged, very hands-on, very embedded with the engineering team. Most would probably say to a fault, but I took that and leveraged it to be beneficial for the team. But what this allowed us to do was these things, this unexpected behavior that would happen. Okay, so we built this component over here and it's supposed to talk to system X. And based on how we had designed it, it actually doesn't work that way in reality. Or the APIs that we thought were there aren't there. Or the documentation was wrong on the payload and then we don't have this piece of information. Or we stood these two components up and now that we've integrated them together, there's this wonky side effect that happened. What this allowed was for these demos, these near daily demos allowed for us to demonstrate the work back to the product manager. And what that allowed was, what that facilitated was lots of conversations about prioritization. So like as these things came up, as we found these issues and errors and whatever you want to call them, this crazy unexpected behavior, daily we could have a conversation about, is this important, is it not, what should we do to resolve it, how should this work, et cetera, right? The team interactions became far more collaborative instead of judgmental. So most teams that I run into or teams that folks work on, it's kind of a throw it over the fence. I write some code and I throw it over the fence to QA, then they test some stuff and they throw it back and things just get thrown around and it's not really collaborative. What this sort of, the outcome of this was that QA was engaged, engineering and product were all engaged in a three-way conversation about like, why is this doing the thing? And then the engineer could be like, well, it's because of X. It's like, well, okay, what can we do about that? And how long is that gonna take, et cetera. So like that totally changed the tone of all of that. Additionally, because the product people were very engaged day to day to engineering, they could then communicate out expectations around where we were in delivering the work, timelines, things of this nature. It sort of cut off what I also see a lot of, which is product owners or product managers get very nervous about dates and timelines. They have no idea what's affecting those things, and they immediately run to like the smartest engineer on the team to ask them to make them some promises about what's gonna be delivered, when and where. And so what this allowed is that if we have those folks engaged in the beginning, on a daily basis, then it makes it much easier to facilitate that communication. And stakeholders outside of the team were super engaged because they were getting regular updated streams of information and they were able to sort of continue to report up and out things that were happening. And then this last bullet is super important because I'm sure a lot of you run into this a lot, but like everyone understood how the app should work, right? So there was no, we got to the end of the sprint and then we did this thing and somebody was like, well, why is it doing that? It's like everyone knew every day how the app should work, et cetera. And then another effect from that was like the feedback from our QA team became more and more valuable in terms of building a better solution. So our QA was more focused on sort of solutions for how to solve things, as opposed to just saying you shouldn't be able to enter numbers in there, or just testing cases of the edges of the code that probably are not even realistic in real life. And really, what we all learned in this whole process was we learned to expect the unexpected. So it became less about like, is your code super performing and super doing the thing? It became in a transition to, we're gonna make a run at doing what was designed and what was intended, and we fully expect that there's gonna be a lot of rough edges, some things aren't gonna work right. And that shift really sort of like brought with it a crazy amount of benefits, which I'll talk about in a minute. But it's a very interesting mind shift from like, I just want to get my work done and I only want to do the things asked of me, and somebody's going to, criticize and critique my work, to a place where it's like, okay, we are all QA engineering, everyone together, sort of going to give it our best go, knowing that like things aren't going to be ideal, and we're going to be prepared to talk about like, what do we do when things aren't ideal? And the result of that was we had a bug-free release. We got to the end of our sprint. It had exactly the things in it that everybody was expecting. It worked and performed exactly the way that everybody had expected it to work for the whole last 2 weeks. And it was like, oh, that, right? Like there were no bug reports. There was no crazy, like I thought I should be able to triple click this and then it was gonna do a thing. There was none of that. We all just sort of landed the plane safely at the end of the sprint. So then the expectation for the team was, well, if you did it once, keep doing it. And so we did for 18 months or so, until this particular app was sunset by like another app that was sort of bigger and larger in scope because this had gone so well, which was super duper cool for all of us involved. And I would tell you though, like that's not even the important part. Like having a bug-free release was not even the thing that I was super excited about, because bugs, smugs, et cetera. Thinking differently about app behaviors and unexpected app behaviors, like far exceeded the fact that we simply had a bug-free release or bug-free releases for a year and a half. It actually changed like the culture of the engineering team and the culture of the company, because these things that I'm talking about actually extend beyond just the engineering team. So I'm gonna share with you guys a couple of things that like, if you make this move, sort of this philosophical move from bugs and sort of what the weight that bugs carry with them, is actually some really cool benefits that come out of that. The first one being is that the most valuable items, that features, functions, were always delivered first. So because we were having regular conversations about unexpected behavior, because we were treating them as first-class citizens alongside features, it gave our sort of folks that were leading the product the ability to holistically look at the work we were trying to get done and where the gaps were, and then sort of prioritize appropriately, like what's the next thing that engineers should work on, right? And I'm gonna jump to the last bullet point about allowing engineers to focus their attention on delivery. Everyone in this room who is an engineer understands that when you go to work every day, you're just doing work. It doesn't really matter whether that work is a bug or whether that bug is building a new feature or whether that work is, it's just work. And so a big part of what we realized here is that helping folks sort of disassociate the negativity of bugs from work that needs to get done allows people to prioritize the real work that actually needs to get done to deliver customer value, et cetera. And so we were always delivering the most valuable items like at the top of the sprint. So by the time we got to the end of the sprint, everybody was happy. It was great. All was well. I'm trying to think if I say it here on another slide, but what my the sort of the project sponsor from seeing these daily demos said one time in a meeting in front of the team, we were doing this product demo, that he said, man, every week feels like Christmas. It feels like I'm getting exactly what I want like every week, and I'm watching this thing evolve. And this was like a sponsor, right? So this is someone who's usually just waiting at the end to see the whole thing, but was like in demos like every week watching this product evolve and come to life. So they got super excited about all of this and like the decisions that we were making week over week. The second thing is that the entire business aligned around how the product would work. So this moved from a conversation where people were always talking about how it should work or people were always talking about this doesn't work right, or this works poorly, et cetera. And it became more of one where folks were talking about, well, wouldn't it be cool if like the product did this? Or wouldn't it be better if the product did that, right? So it became more constructive conversations around how products should work and less around how the product was not working. And then what we found was that folks outside of the product creation team even had ideas and input, and valid ideas and input on like how the product should work or how these things should work, right? So if it's a banking product, it's like, hey, I know you're creating savings goals in this particular way, but like based on my situation or whoever's, like maybe we should think about adding some gamification to how we handle savings goals and things of that nature. Third thing is it allowed us to have a real conversation around what does quality mean. And I put quality with a big Q up there intentionally because I tend to define quality with a small q as sort of these very tactical metrics that people look at. Lines of code, number of bugs, number of bugs post a release, how many did you close, like did you have field validation, those kinds of things. And it moves the conversation over to, who are the number of users that actually completed KYC? Because if you create an application that has 0 bugs in the traditional way we think about bugs, that like everything works according to design, et cetera, but no one onboards and no one opens a savings goal and no one does anything, then like, is that a product of quality, right? So this allowed us to really say, how many users have actually connected direct deposit? And it allows engineers to get engaged in a conversation beyond just the code to say, well, I think that if we remove these 3 steps, then we would get more people signing up for direct deposit. Okay, cool, let's run a multivariate test, let's do whatever, right? But like, it starts to focus people on the right thing. Like, is our app actually working? Is it up? Things of that nature, right? So this allowed us to move from very tactical metrics to more user experience focused metrics. And the last bit, which I think is super crucial, but most non-engineering folks don't, is that this improved team morale, right? So if we stop sort of the no longer using the emotional laden term of bugs, what we found is that folks became a lot less defensive about like either their code, or if you were QA and you were testing, became a lot less defensive about, sort of the arguments between devs and QA about, is this the bug? No, it's not. Yes, it is. This should be changed. Like that just sort of went away because the conversation became more about like, okay, how should this actually work? And then let's have a conversation about how this thing should actually work, right? So there was a lot of less team infighting. People became a lot less, defensive. And there was just a lot more collaboration amongst the larger team. So like I said, the project sponsor was jumping in on these things to provide some input and ask questions and things like that. It turned out to be really well. it turned out really well, yeah. So I want to kind of leave you all with this. Like, change ain't easy, but it's definitely worth it. So when we move away from these very, like I said, when we move away from thinking about or labeling things bugs and we start thinking about them as unexpected behavior, it really unlocks a whole lot of things. It unlocks our ability to start focusing on delivering most important value first, that we can focus on like delivering a solution and a good experience versus just pointing out issues. It actually elevates the quality of your product overall, and you will have a happier and more satisfied team. Thank you. All the questions. You had your hand up first, so.
Yeah. So I guess two questions. So one is, I think a lot of engineers are getting frustrated by having like too many meetings, and so it's like preparing them for the demo is like an extra set of work that has to be kind of done, and then coordinating time and things like that. So how do you address that piece? And then in the actual format of the meetings, is it open to everyone? Is it typically like the product manager, the designer that's kind of always there, as well as obviously the engineers that worked on it? Or is it expected that you have other people, other engineers from other teams that are also coming on it as well?
Yep. Totally going to do that. All right, so the first question was, engineers already have a lot of meetings. Remind me again?
Engineers have a lot of meetings, and so
yeah.
doing a couple demos, like maybe
prepping for the demo, and how do you account for prepping for the demo and prep time and things like that? Yeah. So it turns out that if you do a near daily demo, there's not a whole lot of prep to do. And the prep for the demo is super minimal. So in a lot of these demos, some of them took place in like an integrated development environment. Others just took place on an engineer's laptop. The important part of the demo is for those who are making decisions about how the product should go and what work should be done, is that they get to lay eyes on the product itself. So like, it's less about, is it in a pristine environment, and it's more about providing information to the folks who are making decisions about priority and functionality to be able to actually see what this thing looks like, not quite in the wild, but like once it's been built and it's stood up. The second question was about who's attending these demos. Yeah, so it's really funny. In the beginning, there was a lot of resistance to attendance because people was like, I don't want to spend time on these meetings, and I don't want to do this thing, and will this actually be valuable to me? And my feeling is I don't like a lot of meetings either. In fact, at Daylight, we are a majority remote team, so we have no meetings on Wednesdays for the entire company. Just no meetings on Wednesdays. So I think make a meeting valuable, make it efficient. So typically it is the engineering team, it is the designer, it is the product person. So usually it's what I'm calling the product creation team, which is all of those people are in attendance. And oftentimes it might just be a quick 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I mean, after all, you're demonstrating incremental change day over day. So it really kind of depends on the nature of what is changing. But yeah, it was rare that we had folks from other teams coming and attending. It was usually just the team working directly on the product.
My question was mainly that question. A little more detailed question. Did you have any kind of rules as to, did a PR have to be merged and closed before the demo, or did the demo have to happen before the PR, or was it just a little loose?
So I've done it, So were there rules around whether the PR had to be merged before the demo or not, right? I've done it both ways. The thing that as I was saying, the thing that I found to be most valuable is that folks can lay their eyes on how the functionality is actually functioning. So whether it's about layout and things of that nature, or whether it's about sort of like, I want to figure out like what the experience is like moving from one user journey or flow to another user journey or flow. It's more important that folks, we all sit around and we draw pictures and we talk about like, oh, it's going to be this, and we got to connect this box to that box with this lightning bolt. So it's more about seeing the lightning bolt, like in action. Yeah, more than anything else. So I've been in environments with engineers where, we've committed, like the PR has been reviewed before it was demoed, and any other way, but really the value is can someone lay their eyes on this piece of work, whether it's in a developer's environment or not?
I was just going to try to color it, but I got mine.
Okay, cool.
Basically, like what you kind of described, it sounds it's not necessarily a formal process. It's more around getting this communication, sharing information early, just trying to establish a culture that does those things. That's kind of the sense of it.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's a fascinating sort of journey because as engineers and product creators, we love process and we want to follow process and we want to put all the gates in place and we want to do all the things. And one of the things that I struggled with when putting this talk together was like, how prescriptive do I get versus saying these are really the goals. Take these things, go forward and like adopt them into your environment, right? Because if we're having more often demos and we're having like more frequent conversations around like what is and what is broken and what we should expect and all of these things, we find that when we get to the end of the sprint, like the demo truly is for like external stakeholders because everybody on the team has already seen it. They already know how it's going to work and their brains are already into the next sprint and the next set of work. Yeah.
So, one of your examples was a vendor making a
Mm-hmm.
If you're only essentially looking at the incremental change each day and what adjusted there, how are you avoiding a bug free situation where either an external vendor caused an issue that caused something to break that you already reviewed, it was already good, it's good to go, or just an internal thing, right? If you're only demoing the incremental change, so we've all broken something that's been working for years.
Mm-hmm.
Through what we do. Like how are you catching those things?
How are we handling regression? So the question is, if we're only demonstrating incremental change, how are we effectively catching regression issues? Yeah. So I'm going to address the regression issue bit first. Like this process is not absent of regular QA doing regular QA things and, or just any sort of quality practices that you have, whether you have regression test suites to run or anything of that nature. And in the case where, let's just say for the sake of this conversation, a regression test suite identified this third-party API break magically before it made it into our build, right, and into our release, then that's a thing that we now know, and that goes into the top of the pile along with everything else to talk to the product person about how do we resolve, right? So for example, this happened with a integration that we had with Calendly that was scheduling a bunch of like financial coaching sessions and some things like that. And it broke. And maybe about 2% of users actually use that function. So is it a bug? Like, do we solve this thing right now? The answer was no, by the way, because it affected such a small number of users. And then the conversation became, well, then what do we do with this? And the decision was made to just phase that feature out. So we just phased that feature out. But it's, that's typically how you would deal with that kind of situation. The minute that you find it, it now goes into the daily conversation. If there's decision for work to be made, then that's the thing that gets demoed next, is like the fix or resolution of that.
What was the hardest part about implementing that? Where was there pushback?
Fantastic question. So the question is, where was there pushback or what was the hardest part about implementing this? I think the hardest part is, I would say there were two things that competed for number one. One of those things is folks just don't like change. And so change management, for any of you who have ever tried to drive that in any organization, is just really, really hard, even if it is for the benefit of those that you're asking to change. Folks just don't like to change. So the change, getting people to sort of adopt something new and do something new, like that change management aspect of it existed. The other part of it is really the skepticism. which is why I made it its own slide in this presentation, is there are a number of people who have been doing things so many ways. So when we had our very first bug-free release, or maybe it was 2 or 3 releases in, enough releases in that people cared, some of the other engineers that I worked with from other teams would come over and say, so what's your secret? Like, are you guys working 70-hour weeks? I was like, nope. And they were like, well, are you like working weekends? And I was like, nope. And like, they just could not understand that simply just getting the decision makers in and demoing this thing to them regularly keeps them informed and allow them to make decisions. They were like, well, you must be doing something. Like, are you making some team members work later than this, or are you? And I said, no, we're just doing the things that I just shared with you guys. So skepticism and sort of regular things that come with change management are the biggest pieces. And my experience has been everyone pushes back for like a sprint or 2, but it really only takes about that long for people to start seeing value out of working this way. And then they start to get on board. Oh, sorry. One last thing is, I don't know the best way to describe this, but engineers, we are very apprehensive about showing work before it's done, right? And so getting over that hurdle too is also a thing. So like getting engineers to demo their work, even though they're not done with their work, even though we know it has issues, all of these things, like that gets back to the efficiency of the meeting. Like if I just saw it yesterday and I knew that 3/4 of it wasn't working, I'm not gonna show up today and expect it to be fully working, right? So like showing that work sort of day over day or on a regular basis actually is beneficial for the engineer, because it may be that like now that I've seen this a quarter of the way done, I've changed my mind and this is not a feature we want to build. So like, let's just scrap this work and get you moving on this other feature instead. Yes. Oh, sorry. I'm in the back hat. CI/CD processes? Oh, just in general. Yeah. So the question was, have I or have teams using this method use CI/CD? Yes, absolutely, yeah. So I don't think that this process changes sort of the use of CI/CD. So like in typical traditional fashions of however you've decided to deploy it in your organization, this is totally compatible with that. Yeah, we are doing that today at Daylight.
Do you have these regularly scheduled, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday? And if so, how do you kind of, I guess the other obstacle I kind of think of is, kind of remove that perception of like, oh, they're checking in on my work. It's almost kind of a micromanaging feel to it.
Yeah. So are these daily demos scheduled? And is the second part of the question, does that help remove the micromanaging feel, or how do you handle it?
The opposite one, because if it's like, oh, if you're trying to see what I've done by the end of the day, even if it's not complete already, I don't feel comfortable demoing it. Is it you're just trying to see how much I've done, to see I've done that day?
Yeah.
You get done as a pushback.
Yeah. Is there resistance from the engineers to have to demo every day because they feel like this may be a way to measure like their performance or things like that? Okay. So first, the scheduling question. I've done it a bunch of different ways. The way I find it most effective is it rolled into stand-up. So like stand-up happened at the end of stand-up. It was like, okay, we're gonna demo Tunde's work, Anik's work, and then it's like, okay, we pull it up and we say, yesterday the issue was this wasn't doing this, and the daily increment was I've now made it so that the button turns blue when the thing happens, or I can send a SMS message from whatever now, right? So then like, it's like, boop, send the SMS message, okay, cool, like the way that experience looks, next, and then it's done. So where I've seen this done most efficiently and most effectively is it just becomes it's part of the ceremony of like at the end of stand-up, we have this quick little mini demo, and then we go back to our regularly scheduled lives. In terms of the perception of engineers and them thinking that folks are checking in on their work, I think that what has gone a long way for me is helping folks understand the benefit. that like the reason we are doing this is to make sure that we are delivering the most high value work for the customers. We're also trying to make sure that like we don't get to the end of the sprint and somebody goes, what the heck is that, right? Like all of those situations, like that's why this is beneficial. All right, am I about to get played off the stage? The music or the hook is about to come? All right, I'm gonna leave it there. Feel free to reach out to me around if you have any other questions about this. I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.